Welcome to another episode. It's another Friday, and it's time to catch up with Jacob. And here we have today Jacob Prash. How are you doing?
Blessings in Jesus. Thank you so much for joining us here on Catching Up with Jacob, this pre-Christmas edition where we hope to engage with you on not only the contemporary events, but do so in the spirit of the Nativity.
Amen. And we have our very own Bah Humbug. That would be Elon, who always loves to give me the best news of the day.
Good evening, everybody from Israel.
Also with us is Davey from Down Under.
Good morning. Good to be with you guys again.
And finally, we have someone who's desiring a silent night. We have Marco Quintana.
A couple of silent nights. Good afternoon, evening, and morning, please. Thank you so much. Glad to be with you guys. God bless you guys.
All right. Well, first order of business, very importantly, Monday, in just, 4 short days, the premiere of Why This Time is Different. And we are going to run the trailer yet again. Let me just get this started.
What makes this time different? Why should it be any different than the other times in history when sincere Christians, when biblically literate and believing Christians were convinced it was the close of the age and Christ was coming, even possibly in their lifetime?
History has seen many false alarms at the year 1000 at Y2K.
This was a place of conflict after conflict.
Everything that is happening in the world and on the world stage has been foretold or mentioned in the Bible.
Architects say that by prefabrication, they could reconstruct the temple within 18 months. Satan has always tried to exterminate the Jews to prevent the first coming of the Messiah to bring salvation. In light of the events we see happening in the world again, the rebirth of tremendous anti-Semitism not seen since the Holocaust, since the 1930s and 40s, beginning to transpire again in Europe. Europe is being progressively Islamized. Europeans are becoming minorities in their own countries. To this day, radical Islam looks to this place as a site of victory. As much as it grieves the hearts of people who visit here, what I find even more distressful is that the same hatred that fueled the Holocaust, that fueled the genocide, has come again.
I think we see a major wave. When I started ascending Temple Mount 40 years ago, we had 100 Jews who ascended annually. Now this past year we had 60,000.
Is our culture more important than our identity in Christ?
We are told the armies of Antichrist will converge and assemble for their final attack upon the Lord and his people. Satan's last stand before the terrestrial return of Christ.
The concept of Israel leading to a house of prayer for all nations, Israel leading to the Temple Mount, Zion, the holy mount of God, to be a place of worship for all believers in the Bible and the world. This is a goal that more and more Israelis understand, and therefore more and more Jews and Christians are going up to the mountain and saying this place cannot be an exclusive Muslim site. It has to be a house of prayer for all nations.
What makes this time different?
Well,
Bravo. Bravo.
getting exciting. We'll see exactly how it does on opening day. The anticipation is it's killing me, but that's all right. I would like to mention also, if you would like to help support us for future projects, can always go to Moriel.org. And I believe under the many different panels you can donate to is the film and television portion of Moriel. And that will help give us, the ability to keep bringing you presentations like we did with Why This Time Is Different. We have a slew of ideas that we want to develop. We want to film in the next year and the following year. And none of it's possible without your support. So thank you for, first of all, watching the movie, but any donation you'd like to make, we will make sure that it's used to the best of our ability to bring more of this so that we can bring the message of the gospel, but also provide encouragement, education, especially during these dark times. I can't think of a movie that is more relevant today about the rise of anti-Semitism than Why This Time Is Different.
You know, we are nonprofit. We only sell these films, and we actually market them or sell them at a below market average price. We keep them as affordable as possible to the most people. But the only reason we sell them at all is to recover the cost so we can invest in future films and further films. And we already have at least 2 other films in the pre-planning stages. So if this one works well and the Lord blesses it, we hope to go forward with this documentary. Above all, we ask for your prayers that the Lord will bless it. We're trying to equip Christians to refute things like those who deny the prophetic significance of contemporary events, who subscribe to the errors of replacement theology, who have perhaps bought into the so-called Palestinian agenda, who have not really been taught in their churches about prophecy. Many churches just ignore the issue. So that is our focus. There's also an evangelistic content of the film, a general evangelistic content, but a evangelistic content specifically oriented towards Israel and the Jews. So please keep this project in prayer. We need the Lord to bless it so we can do further projects of this type.
Amen. And with that, I just want to mention also, Davey, you still have those USBs, correct?
Yes, actually, been sending out quite a number just this past week, and I've got a few more I've got to send out on Monday. So yeah, they're still available. They're a great way to, especially now that we don't know how much longer we're going to be able to have the freedom that we currently experience on the internet, with more censorship coming our way, especially here. Well, actually, it's spreading everywhere now. So the USBs, I do highly recommend them. We have the Jumpstart with Jacob. We've got the Quintessential Quintana. Also the Holy Enchilada of Jacob's. I highly recommend all of them, really. And a great way to avail yourself of the teachings. You can have it in... Well, most cars nowadays don't have the CD players or radios or that anymore, but they do have a USB insert, so you can simply plug it in there and plug and play while you drive, that kind of thing. Great way to get the teachings. We want to get the word out as quickly as possible. We do try to keep the cost fairly minimum. They're available. You can either email me at Davy, Davy Rosengreen @gmail.com. Contact David Passmore in the UK. Simply go onto the Moriel UK website. There are download links also available there in the UK, or you can simply order them online. And I think most of them are up on the US website too. I just noticed that Quintessential Quintana is available in the US, but it's not actually on the website as yet, but it is available there. So simply just email Moriel at yahoo.com if you're in the US or Canada.
And just a reminder, if you haven't already, please subscribe to Moriel Chapel on YouTube. Also, our podcasts are available wherever podcasts can be downloaded. Download to your hard drive. Have all the lessons from the weekly Bible studies that are happening on Wednesday and Thursday with Sandy Simpson and Jacob. Also, Bible studies of Marco are there as well. And they're available for you to save for the future. We really would ask that you do that. And then also, if you have not already, please go to our Twitter, subscribe to Moriel on Twitter. And finally, Moriel TikTok, the dreaded Moriel TikTok. It's there. If you are there as well, please join TikTok as well and subscribe to Moriel there. We will be doing a lot more things in 2026 with the Moriel TikTok, perhaps doing some panels there. I'm working, trying to get Jacob up to speed on the new speak that he needs to speak to be able to do panels on TikTok. I'll be, tutoring him in the new year, and we hope to have a few live, maybe Q&A sessions there. And obviously, we are still working on perhaps doing a Q&A session here on YouTube and Rumble in the near future. That's definitely on the agenda.
Yes, one of our projects for 2026 is a weekly webcast akin to this one. It'll be shorter, but it will be focused on Q&A, just Q&A. You can ask any question you want of a scriptural nature, and we will address it.
That will be quite a challenge, and I look forward to that challenge. But with that, let's get started. Jacob, of course, we're going to begin with the Hanukkah attack at Bondi Beach in Australia. Let me just go through some of the key individuals. Sahid Akram, who is now deceased, and Naveed Akram survived and is charged with terrorism-related offenses. And then also the civilian that tackled and tried to take away the gun. His name is Ahmed Al-Ahmed. Interesting thing, because of what he has done, it seems that on many social media sites associated with Ramallah News and some other Arabic news channels, he's being called a traitor for what he did.
Yeah.
Of all things. Jacob, can you
Yeah.
kind of touch on the Bondi Beach attack and what this means not only for Australia, but for the world?
First of all, you're dealing with a political situation in Australia with the current Australian government and the left-wing voters. The question I've asked them, was it Israelis who sent hundreds of Australians home in body bags from vacation in Bali, or was it radical Muslims? Was it Israelis or Jews who slaughtered between 300,000 and 400,000 Christians in East Timor, swimming distance from Darwin, or was it radical Muslims? Much closer to Australia's shores is the southern Philippines, the playground of Abu Sayyaf, where they've killed well over 100,000 Christians. Why do you not see people in Australia protesting about this? Why? Why? Was it the Israelis or the Jewish community that rioted in Cronulla and in Sydney for day after day after day? Let's remember, the Muslim riots in Sydney also began in Bondi several years ago.
Yeah.
Yet the government of Albanese and of a absolutely unprincipled woman, she is just completely devoid of any principle, bigoted Penny Wong. That woman, not only that, I'd have to say, without reviling, the woman is idiotic. The woman is basically idiotic. She's a bigot on steroids, but she's also rather stupid. When you look at the threat to Australia that is surrounding Australia geographically from radical Islam, that has killed Australians, that has rioted in Australia's streets, why are they turning against Israel and the Jews for defending themselves from that same radical Islam that is responsible for what happened in Bali and what happened in East Timor and what happened in the southern Philippines and even what happened in Sydney? Why are they blaming the Israelis and the Jews for defending themselves? It is an outrage. The culpability is not simply with radical Islam or these terrorists who perpetrated the murder. The responsibility is with the Albanese government.
Yeah.
It is with the Australian left. It is with Daniel Andrews. It is with Penny Wong, and it is with the Prime Minister. I pray to God that the people of Australia will come to their senses and put an end to this and begin the radical
Yes.
policy of denationalization and mass deportation of radical Muslims necessary to protect Australian safety, security, and democracy. Radical
Yeah.
Islam is a threat to it. As much as I respect people and agree with them generally, like Bridget Gabriel, who I know, I have a high view of these people and I appreciate what they do and say. But there is one point where I disagree with people like Bridget Gabriel or Steve Emerson or others who've been warning for some time about the Islamic threat invading the Western world even before September 11th. They take the view that it is a minority of Muslims who are radicalized. I disagree. It is a minority who are not radicalized.
Yeah.
The majority of Muslims in the world, may not be terrorists themselves, but they are still pro-jihad. They are still pro-terror. I'm reminded often of the New York Times poll published after September 11th, where 68% of global Muslims said that the September 11th attacks were justified. It is not a religion of peace. This is not a perversion of Islam. It is simply Islam. Terror is not a perversion of Islam. It is simply Islam. They are simply following the literal teachings of the Quran and of Muhammad and the Hadith. A tree will say, there's a Jew in back of me, come and kill him. And the last day will not happen until the tree calls out to the Muslim to come kill the Jew hiding on back of me. That is a teaching of Islam. To make jihad against the infidel, to smite their necks. That is the teaching of Islam. And the history of Islam backs it up. That is how Islam spread. Muhammad himself, if you believe what the Quran and Hadith say about him, he led 27 military campaigns personally. And there was over 65 that happened at his behest and the behest of his deputies. This is not a religion of peace. It is a religion of terror. Yes, there are moderate Muslims, a minority. There are a minority of moderate Muslims, such as that one who tackled the terrorist in Sydney, God bless it. There are a minority of moderate Muslims, but there is no such thing as moderate Islam, with the exception of fringe factions of Islam who the Sunnis and Shias hate and persecute, such as the Ahmadis. They are actual Islamic pacifists. But the pacifist Muslims, or the peaceful Muslims, are not only the minority, they're persecuted by the radicals. There is no way Islam can ever be culturally or politically compatible with Western democracy and pluralism. No way. And those liars who say otherwise are not simply liars, they are traitors.
Let me ask a question to you, since you live in Australia, Davey. Should the immigration and asylum policies of Australia be restructured to prioritize protection of minorities like the Jewish community?
Yes, they should, but with the current government, that's not going to happen. It's been they've been bringing them in deliberately, basically to keep their power base. So look, yes, I believe they should be restructured. I just don't see it happening. Not under this current administration. However, I think there's a lot of Australians who have had a gutful. There is a petition going around out on change.org calling for the resignation of the current administration, including Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. I just checked before we went on the broadcast. I think it's got about 196,000 plus signatures at the moment. There are protests planned for this weekend in Sydney, Melbourne, and elsewhere. Sack the government protests, basically where they're calling for, they want this current administration gone. Anthony Albanese, Penny Wong, Jacinda Allen, Chris Minns, all of them have been so unpopular this week with the Australian public. When they've showed up, if they've showed up, they've been booed, they've been jeered, they know they're not welcome. They've been confronted by survivors that were there. They've been told they've got blood on their hands. Their reaction at the moment is just, okay, tougher gun laws, more censorship, more removal of freedoms for the average Australian, and their hate speech laws. I mean, they're trying to link anti-Semitism with Islamophobia. Now, Anthony Albanese has not used the words Islamic terror, not even once. Nothing's going to change if they don't address the ideology that's behind this. Another terror attack was thwarted only 2 days ago here. There was a group of 7, basically 7 Islamic men who actually had connections to, it actually has come out, the police have actually said they had ties, they had connections to the shooters at the Bondi tragedy. They were on their way up to New South Wales when they were stopped and all the rest of it. They were detained, but they've already been released. And on bail, there wasn't enough evidence to hold them and that kind of thing. But look, until they call out Islamic terror for what it is, this isn't going to get resolved. But look, maybe it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen. Lawsuits have also opened up against Anthony Albanese and the Australian government. There is a Jewish organisation who is, paving the way, not only for them, but for others to sue the current government for their failures on the day. And not just the government, but the services. Look, the failure of the police too is kind of like, it has been unbelievable. It's kind of like there's a police station about a couple of minutes away from where the shooting actually took place. The police officers there actually did nothing. They did nothing except argue with one another, hide behind vehicles. There was a couple of other citizens who tried to get involved. Basically, one of them was asking for the policeman's gun. The police weren't taking action, so she wanted to take action. The inaction by the police is inexcusable. They stood there and did nothing for at least 11 minutes. We don't know exactly how long, but their inaction was just crazy. It took a citizen to get involved, to wrestle the gun off him and hold the gun at one of the shooters. And then how did the police reward him? The police finally do open fire, but they fire on the citizen.
Wow. Elon, a question for you to follow up. You live in a country that does a pretty good job at vetting. For the countries that are letting mass importation of Islam into their countries, what would you recommend that Israel does as far as vetting, as far as monitoring, to make sure that attacks like this don't happen in the future?
Goodness. Well, you already have a lot of those things in place here anyway. I mean, one of the one of the problems, actually, one of the problems with Australia and with the UK is the gun laws. Over here, especially since the 7th of October 2023, a lot more people now are packing heat. They've got a personal firearm. That many more people have taken up because if you get something like the Bondi Beach situation, you're now far more likely to have citizens with firearms who'll finish him before he gets. You remember only a month or so ago there was that shooting in Jerusalem. That guy that started, and the shooter was taken down. I believe it was by a citizen with a personal firearm. And this is far more common. So that's one thing that would help to prevent some of these situations is more armed citizens. The fact that people have had their means of self-defense against a firearm armed terrorist removed in the UK and Australia and in some other places is an absolute disgrace, really. That should never have happened in the UK. That was Blair, of course, and his pernicious little regime. And of course, you've got the same problematic kind of thinking in Australia. So that's one thing that would help prevent these kind of attacks. Even if the police hadn't have turned up at Bondi Beach, someone else could have shot the guy dead quickly. But I mean, over here you do get, for example, I mean, you don't get the same unrestricted immigration here that you get in the UK and Australia, for example, because over here, on the whole, from outside the country, people coming in, you would only get for Jews, you would first of all have to prove your give documentation that provide adequate documentation and proof of your Jewish descent. Now, or you would have to marry an Israeli, and they're very probably sometimes a bit overzealous, but they're always watching out for marriages of convenience here. Now, I don't know exactly how that works though with Arab citizens. I mean, they have all the same rights as Jews anyway here, but I don't know how the if you're like, for example, marrying an Arab citizen here, if from outside the country, you marry. I don't know how that works with regard to citizenship. I mean, they are very careful. I mean, they want to. The government here and generally wants to retain the Jewish character of the state. And they're also quite well aware of demographic issues. So what would happen in the near future? It's not. I'm not completely sure. I think actually now the Jewish birth rate now is eclipsing that of the Arab community.
Yes.
So that's in the favor of the Jewish character of the state becoming more so. But you can't just walk into Israel easily like you can. I mean, there's no rubber boats coming across the channel here. There's no mass inundation with jihadis young men of military age just pouring in unscreened. You do get screened here.
I do have to say though,
Sorry.
they let me in, Elon. So security can't be
Yes.
that good.
I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, look. I mean, Jay, they look. I mean, if you've been, if I don't know if you have you ever flown El Al?
I did.
Good.
I can't say that they did any kind of screening on me. I didn't feel like I
Yeah,
was
well,
screened.
I think now also. I mean, look. I remember when I first started coming to Israel before I even made Aliyah with my wife. Because I had traveled a lot to Israel and, of course, I'm going out of Israel for about 6, 7, years or more, as a single young man, I used to get searched quite. The one thing they didn't do is pull out the rubber gloves, okay? But they searched, they went through, my luggage with a very fine tooth comb, x-rayed my boots and shoes and everything else. And I got, I had a couple of times I nearly missed my flight. But having said that, you were never bored. When you got to the check-in queue, you were never bored because you were. I used to get interrogated, repeatedly because they profile you. And I think, and people say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. It's discriminatory." No, it's just common sense. If you're an 85-year-old grandmother with a Zimmer frame and you've got a guide dog or something like that, you're far less likely to commit a terror incident than a 30-year-old man who from the West Bank or from Syria or something. It's just common sense. And let's face it, 95% or more of world terror incidents are by a certain religious group.
Yes.
So you do see screening of that kind in this country, and that's just the way things are. It's just common sense, and you just respond to the facts on the ground. Which seems to have been thrown. That idea has been thrown into the bin in the UK and Australia and certain other parts of Western Europe. I mean, it's insane.
America, it's the 95-year-old grandmother with the walker and the seeing eye dog who's more likely to be profiled than a young Muslim with a. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes, absolutely. It's just madness. The West has become insane.
To that point, actually, let me ask you, Marco, the idea, are we ever going to get away from the idea that diversity is our strength? Are we ever going to get away from the idea, this misnomer, that allowing communities to come in and they never are integrated into the society but live separately? Is that ever going to go away, especially in America?
I hope so. I really do. If you look at the EU and what they've done over the last 20 years with the multiculturalism and that very same quote that you mentioned, diversity is our strength. Every world leader possibly have said it, and we have documentation on videos of every single one of them reading out of the same cue card. Diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength. And it's failed. I mean, multiculturalism has completely failed because what you end up, you end up with what you have in Minneapolis, what you have in Dearborn, Michigan, just Islamist fundamentalists coming in, setting up a ghetto and without conforming to the society and integrating into the society. And what you end up is a society, it's a community that wants to dominate. I mean, that's really the idea of Islam. If you think about multiculturalism, the one thing that it's definitely what would you say against multiculturalism? It's think about Islam. Islam will never integrate Orthodox fundamental Islam, and it's built in their system. It's built in their theology. It's built in their Quran. Is the fact that they will not integrate because they believe Sharia law is the ultimate goal. They believe Sharia law is the ultimate goal. So they will never do that. And it is a very naive and very demonic driven agenda by the EU and obviously in the US too, and all over the world. The fact that they want to multiculturalize the world, thinking that, interfaith and multi-faith is, every faith has its own, merit, and we have to respect all the religions. And everyone has a chance to contribute to something, to a better world. And it's just not the case. It is just not the case, and it won't be like that. I mean, if you want to see examples of those who have resisted, like Hungary and Poland and Eastern Europe, they've said no to this. They've said definitely no, and they don't seem to have as many troubles as the other countries that have. So, you can have a case study. I mean, if you really want to do an interesting case study, is look at the countries that have allowed it and look at the countries that haven't, or at least curtailed it, and look at the success rate and what they've done. Now, At the end of the day, Jay, this is ultimately the devil's playground to bring about a conformity to a one world system with a one world ruler to try to bring about Satan's kingdom on earth. I mean, people are going to be
Mm.
so uh, fed up with all that's going on right now that they will literally give into a solution to the problem. That they will see no way out, and then somebody will come with a solution, and that somebody doesn't have the best interests. It'll be a nefarious interest. It'll be Satan's interest. But people will be so desperate to find a solution because the world is becoming like that. I mean, you see this movement even within Christianity here in America. Christian truthers, they call them truthers, Truthers. That they will even link arms with the New Age movement and with other Gnostic movements and heretics, just to bring, because they're so tired of the world being in such condition that they will link arms with anybody just as long as they can get their peace or their golden age or whatever the people call it. They will do anything. And so people are getting to the point where they're getting tired of this. They see this, they see the problems, they see no solution. They want to get rid of the governments, and rightly so. But what they're replacing it with is something worse. And this is where, multiculturalism is going to have its end day, I hope soon. But not that I'm trying to be a pessimist, but something else worse is going to come behind that. So, that's what we have to buckle up, get ready, pray. It used to be a time where Christians used to be prophetically tuned in to what's going on in the world, and they would say New Age is going to be part of the end time deception. Now you have Christians who don't care about prophecy who are saying, no, we need to link up with the New Age to make this world a better place.
Yep.
Sad state of affairs.
Yes. Moving on to our next topic, Iran's water crisis, a quiet national emergency. Iran is facing a growing crisis that rarely leads the news, yet threatens the country's stability within. A nationwide water shortage driven by drought, decades of mismanagement, and political decisions is disrupting daily life, agriculture, and internal stability. Jacob, you wanted to discuss some of this. Why don't you talk about the key points?
We have to understand that this is something which was the byproduct of the rule of the mullahs. After Ayatollah Khomeini came to power and the mullahs got control of the government, you had people being appointed to government positions on the basis of Islamic religious / political ideology, of a Shia radicalism. Central to this was the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, who are like a paramilitary mafia with a religious ethos to them. They have control of much of the economy. They were diverting water from Lake Irma, the tributaries to Lake Orma, that has created a salt basin where windstorms are blowing salt from where the largest lake in the Middle East used to be into the cities, causing everything from respiratory diseases to even pulmonary cancer. Where are the people going to go? Can they flee to Tehran? No, they cannot flee to Tehran. In Tehran, now get this, a bottle of water, a liter of water can cost more than a liter of gasoline. Water costs more than gasoline. And the prices of the water are increasing steeply and quickly. It's become so bad that the corrupt Iranian government, the terrorist government of Iran, controlled by the mullahs, is talking about relocating Tehran. You're talking about 10 million people in Greater Tehran, moving the majority of them 1,000 miles south to the other side of the Straits of Hormuz to make a new capital because there's no water in the north. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard, being a corrupt mafia, were in bed with business interests that they controlled, and they were growing water-dependent agriculture, consuming large amounts of water, not just cotton, things like apples and beets and other things that consume huge amounts of water that are not even economically viable produce. But it was caused by this kind of mismanagement of water resource. So now it has affected public health. It has affected electricity because most of Iran's electricity is hydroelectric. And in addition to that, it's now affecting agriculture. The government policy now is to abandon agriculture and import food. Not easily done, given the fact that the Iranian rial, their currency, has been devalued so many times it isn't worth much. So now Iran is having to purchase food and purchase water. They've actually said they're going to purchase water from their neighbors. Many of their neighbors don't even like them. They're buying water from Afghanistan, from the Taliban. It is one environmental mess. It is one economic mess. It is one social mess. It is one political mess. And they have no viable way out of it in the short to medium term. There's just no way out of it. I believe God has given this terrible regime over to its own devices. My concern is for those secular Iranians who do not support the mullahs, and for the growing number of Iranian Christians who are leaving Shia Islam for saving faith in Christ. For them, I care, but the nation is definitely under God's judgment for persecuting Christians and for terrorism against Israel and the West. I believe God has not invoked border judgment on them. It's not something happening for meteorological reasons, primarily. It is happening for reasons of resource mismanagement and corruption. That is what is happening. Sit back, get a bucket of popcorn and a glass of root beer and watch the movie. Enjoy the film. It's God's judgment. My prayer, of course, is for the Iranian Christians and for the Iranian secularists who do not hate Israel, who want peace. I care about them. But the majority of the Iranians supported the mullah regime following the fall of the Shah. There's also a movement now growing in Iran and among the Iranian diaspora to bring back the Pahlavi family, the family of the Shah, into power again. How far this will get, I do not know. But there is a national desperation against the mullahs, and the mullahs are afraid. One of the few sources of income on any major scale Iran has is manufacturing drones for Putin, arms exports. Now, what does it say about Russia and Putin that they're having to buy weapons from Iran when Iran used to be their client? The S-3, the S-4 missile systems, the anti-aircraft defenses, and so forth of the Iranian regime were purchased from Russia. Iran had been a client of Russia in terms of purchasing military hardware. Things have become so desperate in Russia, now the boots are on the other feet. They're exporting drones to Putin. But other than that, they don't have too many sources of income. There are too many restrictions and embargoes on Iranian oil and natural gas. They're just about ticking over. But now it has reached the crisis point. Iran only has enough water to sustain 50% of its population. It only has enough water to sustain 50% of its population. That is Iranians, Azerbaijanis, Kurds. Only 50% of its population can be supported with the water resources they have left. I have no doubt that this is of prophetic significance. And like anything else, relates to the principality of Persia in Daniel chapter 10.
Jacob, is there any chance that you could see some kind of industry like copying Israel with desalination for Iran? Would they even
Lebanon, to a degree, can rely on the melting snowcaps of the Shuf Mountains. That is true, to a degree, and it has a small population. But all of these countries, all of them, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Syria, have water problems because of the Turkish dams of the upper Euphrates in Turkey. The Euphrates is at a low ebb in Iraq. Now they have enough oil wealth in Saudi Arabia and the Emirates to buy their way out of it in the short to medium term. But they've got a water shortage. The water shortage in Jordan is unbelievable. I've been to Jordan a number of times. It's desperate. Not as desperate as Iran, but it is desperate. Egypt is having major water problems. The first of 3 dams in Ethiopia has already been built, generating hydroelectric power, but diverting some of these sources of the Nile. Of course, the White and Blue Niles converge at Khartoum in Sudan, and then flow northward to Lake Nasser at the Aswan Dam, and then into the Nile Basin, all the way through Cairo to Luxor, Cairo, Alexandria. The Nile rivers, levels of the Nile River are going down, because of the diversion of water taking place in Ethiopia. Water is becoming a major, major issue everywhere in the Middle East. One notable exception, Israel. Israel, research at Bar-Ilan University and American water engineering companies, or companies with interest in water engineering, Motorola being one of them, have been working very hard and spending a lot of money to devise ways to make desalination more affordable. Israel is very good at recycling. Israel is very good at water management, but Israel has been able to, in collaboration with the United States, to make desalination more affordable. Israel has actually beat its water crisis. There were times in Israel, things got very serious. You could see the water levels at the Sea of Galilee, how low they were going. It was quite serious. Bottled water prices in Israel became quite high. Israel beat its water crisis. Now, isn't it interesting that Israel has enough water, but all of the Muslim countries around it don't?
Interesting. Marco, for years they've been toting that we will eventually have wars based on water. Given what you're seeing in Iran and the rest of the Middle East, is that really a true possibility, getting closer?
Oh yeah, for sure, Jay. This is something that's been oncoming for a while, and Jacob's absolutely right. In the Middle East, it is a powder keg because of not terrorism, but the wars are going to be caused by a lack of water, which sounds, reasonably possible being in the Middle East, but they've had such, they have rivers like the Euphrates River, the Nile River down in Egypt and in Ethiopia, and you would think like, why is it happening? Is it politically motivated, or is it just, the ideas of climate change? Well, it's a little bit of both. You have Turkey, who wants to dam the Euphrates River to keep water from Syria and Iraq. So that's a big problem there. There's a huge, huge fight between those 3 countries. And of course, Turkey kind of holds the cards right now over Syria. We'll see what happens there, but that is a big issue. Jacob mentioned the issue with Egypt. There's also problems in Sudan. There's also problems in Africa. There's problems in Asia. China's damming all these rivers, and it's causing problems to Laos,
Yes,
Cambodia, and Vietnam. So it is
and
multiple
particularly
places.
India, because of the Chinese damming up the sources of the Brahmaputra, and it's causing major problems in northeast India. Major.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Marco's absolutely right.
yeah, you have some powder kegs going on, and I think the issue of water, life resources, right? You're gonna have these wars or these threats of war. Now it's interesting. The Book of Revelation does speak about this issue of
That's right.
water. You have
Right.
wormwood in Revelation 8, the bitter water, the springs and the rivers, and then you also have water turning into blood. Revelation 16, type,
Yep.
both types of judgment. So you're going to see this coming on, and it's going to be a major, major source of wars. And of course, God's judgment is going to come during the day of the Lord.
And also the drying up of the Euphrates
Yeah,
into,
absolutely.
into Mesopotamia, into the Fertile Crescent.
Yeah, Revelation 9. Yep.
That's absolute. Marco was absolutely correct. Something else that's happened in Iran. They have resorted to exploiting their aquifers,
Bad idea,
underwater, underground water sources, to the point where the aquifers are gone. Now, what that does to the topsoil and to the top terrain, to the surface of the earth, of the land, when you drain the aquifers, you've basically committed terrestrial suicide. And that's what Iran is doing. It's committed terrestrial suicide. I can't see how they can get out of this, at least not anytime in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, when you start draining the aquifers, you get sinkholes.
That's right.
Very true.
Dangerously large ones. Turkey's got loads of them, and some of them are huge. I mean, it's extremely dangerous and even if you don't drain all the water out of the aquifer, you can get, in some cases, if you're near the coast, you can get salt water seeping into the groundwater, and then it's ruined forever. Then, yeah.
It's like what happened in Korach's rebellion. Remember with Moses, the earth just swallowed him.
Yep.
Thank you, Jim. And let's move on to the next story. Turning to politics here in the United States, things are heating up for next year's midterm election. A high-stakes political battle has erupted in Indiana over mid-decade redistricting, with Republican state lawmakers rejecting Trump's backed effort to redraw the congressional maps in favor of Republicans. The resistance has become a major flashpoint in a broader national fight over gerrymandering, political pressure from the White House, and integrity of Democratic representation ahead of the 2026 midterm. What we have is a redistricting plan was voted on December 11th. It was defeated, the proposal, the Democrats, 31-19, with 21 Republican lawmakers joining the 10 Democrats in opposition. That's astounding, Jacob. The amount of defection and voting against their own political futures.
As we've always said, a rhino Republican, like Newhouse, who's now leaving the Senate, or the Bush dynasty, Cheney, people like that. A rhino Republican, or Mitch McConnell. A rhino is nothing but a Democrat who sits on the opposite side of the aisle. A Democrat is somebody who is taken over by a liberalism that is pro-LGBTQ, pro-non-therapeutic abortion, pro-everything that is upholding of traditional moral values of the society. That is what a Democrat is. A Republican, a rhino Republican, an establishment Republican, is everything a Democrat is, plus a liar on top of it. They pretend to be conservative, but they're not. This comes from the state of Mike Pence. I suspect, and others suspect, he has had a hand in this. He remains a viable political figure within Republican state politics in Indiana. Now, there's a lot of conservatives in Indiana, but its government is dominated, at least its legislature, by these rhinos. What the Democrats have done in California, although there are millions of Republican voters in California, they only have a few seats in the House of Representatives. The Democrats can do it, but the Republicans cannot. Well, Texas is saying otherwise, of course, and it has them in a frenzy. Mr. Trump said, if the Democrats are going to do this, then we're going to do it. But the rhinos said no. They're trying to strengthen the hand of the Democratic Party, of Kamala Harris, of Gavin Newsom, of whoever is going to come out against the Republicans in the next election. They have no loyalty to the country. They have no loyalty to a conservative ideology. Their loyalty is only to themselves politically. That's all. They are not Republicans because of any ideological conviction. They're not people like Ted Cruz or Senator Kennedy or Senator Hawley. They're not like that. They are simply in a political club because they have a better chance of being elected as a Republican than as a Democrat. That's the only reason they're Republicans. If it was the other way, they'd just as soon be Democrats. These are just political animals. Emphasize the animal. That's what they are. That's all they are. And the henchman in Indiana is definitely Pence. He was a bad choice for Mr. Trump as vice president in the first term and turned out to be against Mr. Trump. Not that I always agree with Mr. Trump, but Mr. Pence is a rhino. He's a rhino.
Yeah.
That's what he is, and that's what you have in Indiana. They'd rather see the Democrats win than a conservative.
Interesting. Marco, do you have any comments? Specifically, let me ask you, does this bode well if other states start adopting this same kind of routine where they are going to go against redistricting in favor of, especially if they're Republican-led legislatures?
You know, it's very sad that this happened, Jay, because obviously they needed to do this and they needed to support, I believe, the redistricting, and what needed to be done wasn't done. And obviously, Jacob's right. Mike Pence and all those rhinos had a hand in it. It is sad to see that the left is a lot more cohesive in standing up against the Trump's administration's desires and plans to redistrict some of these things, like it happened in Texas. The left is a lot more cohesive than the conservative, semi-conservative, or even fake conservative party, which is the Republican Party. There's not a lot of cohesion there. You can even see those in the MAGA movement, split over Israel, over Jews. It's a very, very difficult thing, and it doesn't bode well for the states in the primary election coming up in the 2026. So it is going to be a very difficult and uphill battle. I don't think it's going to end up being good. I think while I hope other states take the approach like Texas did, it seems to be that a lot of milquetoast states like Indiana are going to end up being the same way.
Yes. You see, we've already seen the division Marco alludes to. Dan Bongino resigned in protest over certain policies in the Justice Department. This week, he'll be gone in the new year. We see the rhino betrayal in Indiana and elsewhere, and in the Senate. We see these things happening, where rhinos in the Senate voted with the Democrats on pivotal legislation. It only needed a few votes, and they got them from four rhinos in the Senate. We see people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owen, Tucker Carlson giving platform to a neo-Nazi, to an admirer of Hitler, to Nick Fuentes, literally to a neo-Nazi. This is Tucker Carlson. This is Candace Owen. gone into wild conspiracy theories. Fortunately, she's leaving, but another one is Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm glad we're going to be seeing the end of her, but again, it shows there is a division even among conservative Republicans. It's
Yeah.
not just a division with the rhinos. This does not look good. The
No.
only hope is the Democrats are in worse shape. I listened to an interview with former Senator Manchin, whose closest thing there was to a sane Democrat in the Senate, the closest thing there was. And what he said about the Biden administration should have terrified anybody. Um, and he was a Democrat. You know,
Yeah.
you'll have centrist Democrats like Fetterman, Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania, but that party is largely now a socialist party. It's
Yep.
largely
Yep.
a socialist party. You need a conservative party to oppose the socialist party, and we
Yep.
really don't really
So,
have one.
no, no. Yeah, Jacob's absolutely right. I mean, the left has become Mandani, has become AOC, has become Omar, has become Talib, has become the extreme left, the red and green that we talked about earlier, a few episodes back, the red and green mixing together. That's what the left is now. I don't even call it a liberal party anymore. There's nothing liberal about it. It's extreme left Marxism, communist socialist. They like the word used, democratic socialist, but that's Bernie Sanders' way of saying, I'm a communist and I'm here. And but that's taken over the party. The Schumers, the Pelosi's are out the window, and a new former party is there. And there is nothing like that on the conservative right. There's nothing like that. There's MAGA, there's conservatives, there is semi-conservatives, there's rhinos. It's a mixed bag of all kinds of nonsense on the right, and and Trump hasn't been able to keep a solid base together, probably because a lot of the things that he's compromised in, and in our disagreements that we have with him here, it's caused him to become less agreeable among the party that he was able to unite back in 2016 and early 2024. So I hate to say this, Jay, but because I had better things and hope for better things, but that's because sometimes people put their hopes on some kind of political savior, political things. It never works out. This is the same thing about
Never
Reagan.
works
It's
out.
the same thing about Bush. It's the same thing about Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Obama. It never, ever, ever works out. Why? Because we need a king, King Jesus.
Amen. We're going to move on to the next story. This one's interesting because it's landing right in the middle of where I live. Netflix, what started off as a way for you to rent through the mail DVDs, well, it's not quite that small of a company anymore. Netflix has proposed the acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery, but not only Warner Brothers Discovery, Warner Brothers Entertainment. This would gain Netflix control of massive legacy IP. We're talking HBO, DC Comics, Looney Tunes. We are talking about all sorts of Harry Potter, toy licensing, theme experience, consumer products. This is a massive deal in the making, and it just goes to show you that the Hollywood system is in dire straits economically. You're seeing the collapse in real time of the Hollywood studio system. Something that we've been talking about for a very long time now, Jacob.
Yes,
So
we certainly are.
I'll ask you this question. Does this acquisition mark the final confirmation that traditional Hollywood can no longer survive independently? And what does this say for Disney and Sony in the future, the last two standing independent studios?
They've self-destructed. Go woke, go broke is part of it, but only part. Disney diversified into all kinds of things that diverted its focus away from its traditional market, which is family entertainment and children and things like that. They even had Miramax and other companies that were making R-rated movies. there were things that under Iger was the man who destroyed Disney more than anybody else. And the amount of homosexual talent in the production, in the control of production in Hollywood and certainly in Disney, again, it committed moral suicide. So that resulted in a financial suicide. In its theme parks as well as in film production. I also saw when Time Warner CNN, the news bias of CNN was another factor in the downfall of Warner Brothers. Definitely, definitely. And now who wants CNN? Its viewership keeps plummeting. It's become unsalvageable. Somebody is going to buy it for $2.50. You know, MSNBC is also in trouble, of course, but we're talking about the studios. Is Paramount really a player? That's a question. How much capital can Paramount really access to buy up other studios?
Well, they were bought out just recently, Jacob, as well. They were bought out by a much larger media conglomerate owned by, I believe it's Oracle's son.
Yeah, but would you still consider them to be an independent company?
No, they are not. They are a wholly owned subsidiary of Skydance Media.
Oh, Skydance. So why are they trying to make a bid?
No, it's Netflix has bought Warner Brothers. So Netflix, the streamer, has bought Warner Brothers.
Hasn't Paramount also made a bid on CNN?
I don't know if Paramount has put money out. I know that they have been struggling financially for a while.
Yeah. They're down on Gower Street, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Well, they're right next to a graveyard.
They're ready to go there.
Yeah, Hollywood forever. Yep. So Paramount has lost its independence as well.
Correct.
With the buyout.
So Disney and Sony are the.
Disney will be next.
I do.
Do you?
I think Disney is in dire straits. And I think sooner or later, a bigger media conglomerate will look at it and say, I want to expand my stage presence, my production capacity. And there are a few players that can do that.
What about Universal?
Universal is still operating under the NBC banner, Comcast.
Yeah.
So yes, I guess you have Universal, you have Disney, and you have Sony.
Sony, yes.
And then Lionsgate, but Lionsgate is a much smaller studio.
Oh boy.
Marco, let me ask you a question. What does it mean for the future if Netflix is going to expand into toys, licensing, franchise merchandise? What does it mean for the global distribution and the gatekeeping of culture and storytelling? Since we already know that Netflix leans very, very liberal and left.
Yeah, I mean, Netflix is going to become just a giant gatekeeper and a giant holder of any information, anything cultural, anything relevant, anything that people would watch, and filter it through their own lenses in order for people to be persuaded. I mean, if you think about the Obama has a connection with Netflix, Yeah, and he's going to benefit from this big time, big time. Him and Michelle Obama. I don't know if they're still married, but anyway, that's a different story. But they will benefit from this, and Obama has mentioned things like he would love to own a news network. I don't know if they're going to call it the Obama News Network, but there's going to be a cultural influence that is going to be pervasive through the Obama cultural, I guess, eyes, you could say it, and even Susan Rice, former Obama advisor. I think she's on the board of Netflix. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, or
she was on
board?
she was at one time. I'm not sure if she still is, but she probably is. But she was on the board at Netflix for a very long time.
Yeah. So, well, people may say, "Oh, there's nothing. It's just a stretch." I said, "No, no, no. Really looked into this. Netflix, although will maybe I don't know if they're going to stop it. You know, buying the Warner Brothers Discovery and what was the other one? Legacy. I don't know if they're going to do it. It may happen, but if it does, watch out because now cultural influence through Netflix is going to become bigger. If it's already big, I mean, think about streaming. Netflix, it's right up there, probably number one. If you think about how much has changed, how much society has changed since that company in 20, was it 2010? I used to remember getting DVDs from them. It's changed and revolutionized the way we watch and we stream things, right? And think about today, like you can watch sports on stream. You can watch, I think Prime Video is getting into sports, and Netflix is wants to get into sporting events. So everything in your life, you know, that you consume culturally, politically, entertainment, sports for children, it's going to have a bigger filter in order for them to persuade young people, the masses, the unsuspecting fools out there that the book of Proverbs talks about, and persuade them to a political idea of what LGBT, climate change, and marijuana.
Marco, would you say that, Marco,
Anti-Christian and anti-Jew, by the way.
Yes.
Marco,
Go
would
ahead,
you
Jing.
say that Netflix is becoming to streaming what Amazon has become to online shopping? You got to do
Yes,
business with.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. I don't think, I mean, I don't know what the percentages, I don't have those numbers in front of me, percentages of home that have Netflix, but many people that have Netflix also have Prime Video. I mean, it's just, it's like, it comes preloaded in your TV, it comes preloaded on your phone. It's becoming Google. I mean, it's like if you want to watch anything, it's going to be a few choices. And,
Yes.
you know, I don't know, the Antichrist might want to be on Netflix soon.
Yeah.
Yes.
To your point, Marco, the amount of actual sound stages that Netflix had, they also have a bunch of sound stages on Gower. The amount that if they got Warner Brothers, you're talking they've probably tripled, if not quadrupled, their amount of sound stages that they have access to. And this works out when you think about it from this angle. If they have IP with DC Comics and with Harry Potter and all the IP, talk
Yeah.
about the episodics. They would have access to basically print money by having your Superman series, your Green Lantern series on exclusively on Netflix.
I
Yeah,
think the big.
absolutely. And think about children's content. Oh, sorry, David, go ahead.
Oh no, you go for it first, please, Marco.
You think about
Children's content.
owning you from grave, you know, from cradle to grave. You know, they
Yes.
will own your children's content, they will own your teenage content, adult content, and as you get into your geriatric years, you can have that. So from cradle to grave, they'll be able to control information. And with the amount of information that now that exists in the world with movies and you know the amount of storage you can have on a phone and on a flash drive, you can literally have somebody brainwashed for their entire lifetime, and they wouldn't even know it because they see life as through a paradigm, a prism of Netflix.
And
Yes. Go ahead, David.
Oh, and if Netflix ends up with Warner's, the whole Warner archive, plus Disney, plus Sony would mean they would get all the Columbia pictures, all their backlog, and all the rest of it too. I can guarantee that would see the end of physical media, so it'd be only streaming in future. Plus, if you look what they've been doing with streaming too, you'll never see the movies that you grew up with and loved in their original form ever again. Look what Amazon Prime did to It's a Wonderful Life last year when they streamed it at Christmas time. I'm picking this one for a reason because it's probably the most extreme form of editing I've ever seen or heard about in my life. They edited out 25 minutes of the movie, the whole point of the movie, the whole sequence where George Bailey got to see his life as though he never existed. That was completely cut from the streaming version. They got lots of complaints about it, but this is what happens. You got a physical copy, it can't be touched. This comes to all media. This is why I encourage people to get the USBs and all the rest of it. Have Bibles. Don't rely on an online Bible, because if it's online, it can be tampered with, it can be changed, it can be edited. They're doing it with several movies. You'll never see movies in their original form again. And Netflix, I don't think, as woke as what Disney and all the rest of them are, don't think it'll get any better on Netflix. I think their so-called big hit for this month is a drama called Queen of Coal, which is about a trans woman, person, man, whatever, who's trying to challenge the patriarchy. Wants to become a coal miner, but has to fight against the patriarchy and the oppression and all the rest of it of the 1800s and all the rest of it. So you're going to get the agenda they want to push, and that's all you'll get.
Yeah, some of the things that I think that is one of the major bottlenecks for Netflix right now is, for example, one of their wildly popular series is Stranger Things, yes. And they're releasing it piecemeal because I suspect they didn't have the capacity to have it done all at once. They had to film it bit by bit, especially with all the other series that they're taking on at this point. So this is a major move in Hollywood, and it does have ramifications down the road. But we have another story coming out of Hollywood, a tragedy. Rob and Michelle Reiner, one of the best movies of all times, as far as I'm concerned, The Princess Bride, directed by Rob Reiner. Classic Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally. Rob Reiner was found murdered December 14th, 2025. Jacob, why don't you go ahead and do the bullet points and key points and the takeaway?
Of course, they were brutally murdered, allegedly by their son in Brentwood, near Beverly Hills, near Bel Air, actually. And it stunned people. Look, to his credit, I would have to make a distinction between the cinematographic art of Hollywood and the hypocritical culture of Hollywood. He made some good films as a director. He had good genes. His father was Mel Brooks' straight man, Carl Reiner. He was in All in the Family, playing Meathead, Archie Bunker's son, and so forth. He grew up in the industry. He had a running start because of his father, and he proved himself as a director. He never made X-rated movies or things like that. And I will also point out that when Charlie Kirk was murdered, unlike Jimmy Kimmel, and unlike Congresswoman Olmert and some other people on the political left who resorted to a subhuman reaction, he did not. He responded to the murder of Charlie with dignity and with compassion for his wife. And he made this statement concerning Charlie's wife: I'm Jewish, but I believe in the teachings of Jesus. Now, I wish that he did believe in the teachings of Jesus, that Jesus was the Messiah, which I profoundly doubt he believed that. However, he was not the most disgusting figure in Hollywood in terms of the way that messing woman has behaved, or the way those women of The View behave, or something of this nature. He wasn't the Jimmy Kimmel type. He never went that low. Politically, however, he was appalling. He was pro-LGBTQ. He was, the whole same-sex agenda. He was pro-abortion. He was a supporter of Barack Obama, who was an enemy of Israel and the Jewish people. I'm convinced he was, with his pressuring other countries to vote against Israel on the UNESCO policy of saying Israel has no claim, historically or otherwise, to its biblical archaeological sites. Obama is an enemy of the Jewish people, and I believe an enemy of America ultimately, but certainly of the Jewish people. And Reiner still backed him. He backed Hillary Clinton. He backed Harris, the whole agenda. And he suffered from what people call Trump derangement syndrome. I don't like him. I didn't like him. I didn't respect him. But I do not celebrate his murder. I do not celebrate his murder. I do not mourn his death. I do not mourn his death, but I do not celebrate his murder. A brutal murder like that is something that is a crime not only against the victims, but against society at large. And again, politically, he was the lowest of the low. But personally and morally, he was not the lowest of the low. He was not Hollywood pornography. He was not, vicious with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He was not those things. And I acknowledge he did have a talent that is going to be a loss to the industry. But it happened at Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah. Hanukkah is celebrated when the Maccabees had a victory over the self-hating Jews, the Jewish traitors. Menelaus and the traitors to the Jewish people were the first people the Maccabees eliminated, assassinated. We have a lot of Menelauses today. We have left-wing Jewish politicians, 1/3 of the Jews in New York who voted for Mamdani are Menelauses. Chuck Schumer is a Menelaus. Jerry Nadler is a Menelaus. Wasserman Schultz is a Menelaus. Blumenthal is a Menelaus. Adam Schiff is a Menelaus. There's no Steve Cohen is a Menelaus. There's no shortage of these Menelauses. No shortage of them. However, the fact that this Menelaus was killed on Hanukkah is probably not a coincidence. Again, I am not celebrating his murder, but I am not mourning his death. It is a loss to the industry, but he was a terrible person. He was politically not only biased, but deranged in his thinking and his verbality. I only wish that when he said he believes in the teachings of Jesus, that he really did.
I would go one step further and say, instead of Menelaus, I call him an Achan.
Yeah. Yes, that's fair enough.
Our final topic before we go to backstage, and we just want to encourage you, if you have not already, I know we have some questions from last week, but we would like some additional questions. We're going to talk about another release in Hollywood, this time by Angel Studios. It's releasing David and Goliath. It's a animated cartoon, perfect for the holiday seasons. And according to Rob Schneider and the actors and filmmakers, the upcoming Angel Studios animated film David and Goliath has encountered resistance in theatrical distribution. Schneider claims that major studios, including Disney and Paramount, are pressuring the theater chains to limit the number of screens allocated to the film, raising renewed questions about gatekeeping, ideological bias, and fairness in Hollywood exhibition. If this is true, this would mean that they want to make sure that their films are favored for the holiday season rather than this faith-based film. Davey, do you think there's any validity to this allegation by Rob Schneider and the filmmakers that Disney doesn't want an animated film about a Bible character to have it more than one or two screens?
Yeah, I actually look. I believe that to be true. Look, Disney's frightened. It's kind of like they've had the worst year ever in terms of box office. Their animation of such, if you can call it that, of late has been absolute garbage, absolute trash, woke garbage. Look, normally Thanksgiving Day, it always used to be Thanksgiving Day weekend, always used to be the big box office weekend in the States. And usually that's when all the major blockbusters were released. And this year, there's been nothing. I have found it interesting too. No one's done a Christmas themed movie for ages. It's kind of like I know some people were talking about this recently. I think the last major, and I've never seen the film, so I can't comment on it, but the last Christmas themed movie that hit the Hollywood scene was the movie Elf. There really hasn't been a Christmas themed movie since, and Christmas usually meant box office success, especially this time of the year. So I think they are frightened by Angel Studios' upcoming David. They are frightened by that. Disney's latest release was what was it? Ellen McKay, I think it was called. In its first 6 days, its opening 6 days, it only took 2.1 million. That's the lowest amount ever for any Disney release. And if you adjust figures for inflation, that's just kind of like, that's rock bottom. 2.1 million is just unbelievably bad. I hope this wakes the companies up. It probably won't, because we know what they're all about. They're still going to push the woke agenda, no matter what. But I think good on Angel Studios. It's kind of like I have heard they have been limiting, really putting the pressure on, so it's not being screened in many places. But I did notice here it's going to be screened in our town here in Ararat, so which is great for something like that to make it to a small town like Ararat. You know, that is big. So I think this is good.
And yes, this is the same Angel Studios that has the production chosen, but it is a larger IPO, and it is positioning itself to take on Netflix as a streaming, faith-based Christian content producer. So, you know, you do have the sense that they're willing to do business with anybody to get the faith-based stuff out. But what's, I guess, the bigger question that I would ask, do you think Disney and Paramount and the studio system has sway over the theaters anymore? The theaters are closing down and suffering like never before.
Yes.
So why would they listen to limiting their money, limiting their profit?
Well, I think that's one reason they should screen it, because I think it may actually bring in more money than you got to do better than Disney's last one. 2.1 million is nothing.
No, it isn't. That's really bad.
Do you think that this is a door opening for Christian content? I asked because we happen to be doing Christian content ourselves. Is this a potential if David and Goliath does, you know, pretty good? Will theaters start to understand that there is a huge market that is underserved?
Yeah, look, faith-based films have usually done pretty well. It's kind of like if you go back to the golden days of Hollywood, you know, you have all the biblical epics, Ten Commandments, Ben-Hur. They always usually did pretty well at the box office. You know, with all its theological problems and all the rest of it, Passion of the Christ still did tremendous box office. There is still an interest out there for faith-based movies. People are sick of all the woke garbage, and I think there definitely is a market. And you know, I'm not a fan of The Chosen. I also do not like the approach of Dallas Jenkins because I kind of know where he's
I
coming
would agree.
from. I know where he's coming from theologically, and I would disagree with him with his approach. But The Chosen has done well. He did a remake of the best Christmas pageant ever last year, and I believe that did well. I didn't see it because I grew up with the original and I wasn't going to, but there is a market there, and I think people would pay to see quality for a change. They're over the garbage, and cinemas will die if something doesn't turn it around.
I agree. Jacob, let me ask you a question. Do you see this as an opportunity for Christian films to finally be made, in your opinion? And how does this bode well with things like why this time is different? How are we going to get that into mass distribution?
If we're talking about the industry, I'll always remember something I heard in an interview. Jerry Bruckheimer, one of the few, I wouldn't say necessarily ultra conservative, but certainly right center filmmakers in Hollywood, was Jerry Bruckheimer, as was certain other ones. What was Michael? The guy who did
Michael Bay.
Ocean's 11. Began with the W. Oh boy, how can I forget his name?
Ocean's 11.
I know his son's a Jewish believer. I know him.
Louis Millstone
No,
produced. Oh, that's the original. What am I looking
Yeah.
at? Steven Soderbergh
no.
produced it, huh? Let's see.
What- In any event, Jerry Bruckheimer said, the bottom line in Hollywood is always money. If there's a market for something, they're going to go for the money. They don't care what it is. Miracle on 34th Street, the greatest story ever told, whatever it is, Hollywood will follow the money. Money is the only thing that outweighs woke in Hollywood. Money, mammon, trumps woke. So that is the question, the commercial viability of it. The other is independent films. As Hollywood is disintegrating, basically what happened to the music business 15, 20 years ago, the recording industries with record sales and people being able to pirate music online and so forth, the kind of disintegration we saw in the music industry before Apple downloads and things like that, we are now seeing that kind of disintegration of the Hollywood film industry. And what is going to replace it? One of the things that's going to replace it is the capacity for independent producers to make independent movies and market them outside of the system through the internet. I can see, as an alternative format to Hollywood or to Netflix, I can see Christian films doing well in the alternative market.
I would agree.
Market. Okay,
I would agree.
say. Now, this is something that Alvin Toffler suggested was going to happen back in the 70s. He foresaw this general trend that was going to come to media. And he was right. He was right about a lot of things. And this was one of them. So to answer your question, I can see Christian films doing well if they're well produced, well made, as an alternative to mainstream media. Much the same as social media news platforms outperform the networks now. You know what I'm saying? They can't control the internet beyond a limited point. They would like to, but they can't control it beyond a limited point. So to answer your question, I do think the possibility is there, but it would require prayer. It would require, obviously, investment. resources that God can provide, and it would require Christians with the calling and the talent to do it.
Yeah.
Yes, I can see it happening.
By the way, it was Jerry Weintraub, I
That's
believe
it, Jerry Weintraub. You're right. Jerry Weintraub was
it
also
was
a
one of our Rumble watchers
Yeah.
gave us the.
yeah, he's also a Republican, right center Republican. His son is a Jewish believer.
Excellent. Well, with that, we're going to go to backstage. Please stay with us. We will be back in a few minutes and we will answer all the questions that you've given us. Thank you so much for watching up to this point. And remember, December 22nd, please support us and watch the movie Memorial has produced, Why This Time is Different. Thank you so much. Welcome to Backstage. This is the time that you are able to ask questions to Jacob or the panel, and we will do our best to answer them. We will tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us God.
Well, help. Okay.
Jacob, first question. Melissa Dougherty recently had a video discussing the dichotomy of the soul or the tripartite of the soul.
Yeah.
This has been basically a question on the minds of one of our viewers. Could you explain the difference and which view you take?
Okay. Some people have raised concerns about a woman teaching men, that her teaching ministry or platform is not oriented towards women's Bible studies, but it's general. Others would see it as a discernment ministry. I've not taken sides in that particular issue. I do believe that doctrinally, women can teach doctrine to other women, but mixed congregations should be taught by men, or only men can teach men, although I do think women can teach women. Now, whether she's engaging in doctrinal exposition or not, is different people have different views. To me, she seems more like acting on discernment issues. She's apparently come out of some bad churches, and she exposes those bad things. The material of hers I've always watched. I agreed with nearly all of what she said. I've never had a disagreement with her before. Her views pretty much echo my own, and I think echo the views of all of us at Moriel. I've never had an issue with her before. This time, however, with respect, I believe she is definitely wrong, and she has stepped over the line between discernment and biblical exposition teaching, didaskin in Greek. I think she's stepped over the line, and I think she's got it wrong on this particular point. What forges or frames or motivates her is she's trying to refute false teachers. So because the word faith false teachers, whom she, like we, rightly is in opposition to, hold to this view of man as body, soul, and spirit, that the soul and spirit are not synonymous. That is a trichotomy view, as opposed to a dichotomy view, where the soul and spirit are the same. In the trichotomy view, they're separate. Because the word faith preachers, at least most of them, take a trichotomy view, she attacks the trichotomy view because they hold it. I think she's done that with that motive, but she has badly exegeted, she's misexegeted some of the scriptures that she's appealed to in her quest. Because a false teacher or a false church or a cult even believes something true does not justify the cult. What they believe is false is the issue. However, because a cult or a false teacher or a false church believes something, that does not make it false. The Roman Catholic Church is a sacrilegious abomination based on idolatry, superstition, necromancy, and a false priesthood, a false father, and a false gospel. It's completely false. Yet Roman Catholicism believes in the virgin birth. Roman Catholicism believes in the triunity of the Godhead. Roman Catholicism believes in a literal resurrection of Jesus. You can't say that the virgin birth or the resurrection of Christ or the triunity of the Godhead, the Trinity, if you will, are false simply because the false religion believes it. I think this is the mistake she has made. Her first mistake was her mishandling of certain scriptures. Most pivotal of the ones she cited was Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12. For the word of God is living, active, and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing as far as the division of soul and spirit, of both joints and marrow, able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. This is a literary parody in which Paul compares the relationship between the soul, that is, our consciousness in the sense of intellect and will, our soul, in relation to our spirit, which is where God's spirit dwells. We know with our spirit, we understand with our mind, that is our soul. She has mishandled this completely. We are tripartite beings because we're made in the image and likeness, imago Dei, of a tripartite God. As we've said many times, we have a spirit because God does. We have a body because God does. Prepare thou a body for me. When Adam heard Jesus or heard God walking in the garden, it was Jesus. There are even Christophanies in the Old Testament, enfleshments of God, long before the conception of Christ. And we have a mind because God does. Who has known the mind of the Father? She completely gets this wrong. Because word, faith, money preachers believe in trichotomy does not make trichotomy wrong. The Roman Church believes many true things. What false religion and false teachers do, we are told in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 2, is they parasoxusin. They put truth next to error. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1. They put truth next to error. False teachers inspired by the devil use truth to camouflage error. So the Roman Church would say, we believe in the Trinity. We believe in the resurrection of Christ, that it was literal. We believe in the virgin birth. Therefore, we are kosher. No, you may believe those things that are true, but you also believe people must atone in purgatory for their own sin, as opposed to the blood of Christ cleansing from all sin. You have a different gospel. This is where she went wrong. Know ye not you're a temple of the Holy Spirit? The temple held the outer court corresponding to our physical body. Soma in Greek, guf in Hebrew. Then there's the holy place. Keep your mind holy, the renewal of your mind. That is, in Greek, psuke. Psuke, we get psychology. In Hebrew, the word is nefesh, nefesh. The innermost man or woman corresponds to the Holy of Holies, where God's Spirit dwells. His Spirit dwells in our spirit. In Greek, this is known as pneuma. In Hebrew, this is known as ruach. She does not apparently understand these things. We are tripartite beings. Her other argument is that dichotomy has been the traditional view of the church. Well, she bases the traditional view going back to Augustine. Christianity would have been better off in most respects if there was no Augustine.
Absolutely,
At least not as a formative figure in Christian theology. Augustine Platonized Christianity. He took a biblical Judeo-Christian faith and he turned it into a Greek philosophy. He reinterpreted it as a Greek philosophy. He didn't just explain it in terms of Greek philosophy. He Hellenized the gospel. Augustine believed that because God knocked Paul to the ground, the church can use violence to convert people. Augustine became the justification for inquisitions, for papal wars, for the Crusades, etc. This was Augustine. Augustine was a sacramentalist, influenced by Ambrose of Milan and Cyprian of Carthage. He believed in infant baptism and baptismal regeneration. Augustine corrupted the church, fundamentally corrupted the church.
Yeah.
In the parable of the wheat and tares, Jesus made it clear, wait to the harvest to make the separation between the wheat and the tares. And when he explains the parable, he says, the field in which the enemy sowed the tares is the world, not the church. Augustine changed one word, and he made the field that the enemy sowed the tares in the church. So he invented this horrible doctrine that bastardized New Testament ecclesiology, called the visible and invisible church. Baptize the babies, baptize everyone. We'll let God decide who's really a Christian and who isn't. The church is made up of the saved and the unsaved. No, the church is made up of the ecclesia. It is the ecclesia, it is the called out ones. Unsaved people are not part of the church. They may infiltrate it, but they're not born of the Spirit. No, just baptize everybody. Why did he do that? Because Constantine pseudo-Christianized the Roman Empire, and it became the religion of the state. The millennium began to become spiritualized. Oh no, the millennium is the age of the church. It got to the point that because of Augustine's influence and others like him, that in the year 1000 AD, people began giving their lands and their wealth and so forth and property to the papacy, because they believed the millennium was almost over, Christ was coming. Augustine did far more damage to the body of Christ than he ever did good. Far more damage. Now, he was right about the heresies of Pelagius, who denied original sin. He and others were right about that. But a lot of people were right about that. Augustine was wrong about far more than he was right about. He did a lot more damage than he ever did good. For her to appeal to Augustine and say that dichotomy has been the traditional view of the church, I wouldn't base anything on Augustine. This is a Calvinistic doctrine and a Roman Catholic doctrine. Roman Catholicism believes in patristic authority, particularly Augustine. John Calvin in his Institutes repeatedly said by the authority of Augustine. Augustine had no authority. Authority in the church is apostolic. It is not patristic. It doesn't come from the fathers. It comes from the apostolic, the apostles, inspired by the Holy Spirit to write the New Testament after they'd been trained by Jesus. Her thinking about church history is completely off. Her mishandling exegetically of Hebrews chapter 4, verse 12 is completely off. Now, I am not demeaning the other good things she has said. I have normally agreed with her. This is the first time I have, in any significant way at least, disagreed with her. But she is absolutely wrong, and she has now, in this instance, stepped across the line. She went from discernment into biblical exposition, into teaching. And women should not teach mixed congregations. They should only teach other women. So she was out of God's order in what she did. She mishandled the scriptures exegetically. And her understanding of church history is warped. Again, I'm not attacking her personally. I've normally agreed with her. But this time, she got it wrong. Dead wrong. Please tell her I said so. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Moving on to the next question. The pastor of the church my parents attend has committed adultery with a member of the church. The church is somewhat apostate, tolerated the likes of Joyce Myers, and involved with other ministries that support LGBT. My question is, what, if anything, should I do with this information? I've already told my husband. Is it in my hands now? I don't want to be the one holding this information and not do something about it if I'm supposed to do something. I don't attend this church, but my parents do. My understanding of the scriptures is, since this is a pastor, it's a man's job to bring this before the church.
I agree. Your husband is your covering, and you should go to your husband, and he should be the one to voice it. However, the very fact that this church was into the false teachings, the seriously false teachings of Joyce Meyer, and they were compromising on the LGBTQ issue, no Christian who loves the Lord in their right mind should be in that church anyway. It's not a church. It is a public sewer. It's not a church. You're not going to church. You're crawling into a sewer, if that is what they're backing. So first of all, irrespective of the pastor's adultery, nobody should be going to a church like that anyway. Now, if it is not your church personally, you do not have the responsibility to bring the issue to the church. You do have the responsibility to tell your parents or family or loved ones or friends who go to that church. But if they had any real discernment, they wouldn't be in that church anyway.
Yeah.
You are right to say the headship is your husband's. It's unclear from your question if he attends that church. If he does, the leadership needs to be confronted. That pastor is not eligible for ministry. He's not eligible for leadership. But if the church is compromising on LGBTQ, as per Romans chapter 1, that pastor was no good anyway to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Jacob, which Bible expositor of the 20th or 21st century do you recommend?
There is not one. There are multiple. There are multiple. And there are different aspects of exposition. Certainly, I would look at the more traditional people like F.B. Meyer. Absolutely solid. he would be one. I look at people like Andrew Murray. He would be another. You're not going to go wrong with people like that. They were good men from a better age. Although he was moderately Calvinistic, Charles Spurgeon's sermons are well worth reading. I'm not saying I would have agreed with him on absolutely every point, but I agreed with him on most points. Absolutely, Charles Spurgeon would be another one. Although I have reservations about some of the things he wrote, and so did he later on, most of the books of the Chinese Christian Watchman Nee are quite good. Most of the books of Watchman Nee are quite good. Then we go into the realm of Messianic scholarship, but there are multiple realms, multiple dimensions to this. In terms of Sitzumleben and Jewish background, the Grand Master, the harbinger of the others who followed him, was Alfred Edersheim, followed by David Barron, followed by Franz, oh boy. Help me out, Elon.
You mean Delitzsch? You don't mean Delitzsch, do you?
Delitzsch, yeah, Franz Delitzsch.
Keelan Delitzsch, they're...
Yeah, Franz Delitzsch. They were the pioneers of that time. Now, in terms of Jewish hermeneutics, there was someone called Lightfoot. There are two Lightfoots. This is the one who was in the time of the Puritans in England. He wrote a Midrashic commentary on the New Testament. He was way ahead of his time. Although he had been somewhat Calvinistic, something he seemed to pull away from later, it appears, but who had tremendous insight, in my opinion, was A.W. Pink, Arthur Pink. He would be another one, Arthur Pink. Another scholar who looked at the scriptures in terms of hermeneutics of the early church is R.N. Longenecker, Richard Longenecker, Longenecker. From a Messianic perspective, all of the above. Franz Delitzsch, Avram Shapiro, Adolf Shapiro, certainly David Barron, certainly Alfred Edersheim, certainly Richard Longenecker. I would say A.W. Pink, although some would disagree. I feel strongly Pink had keen insight. And Lightfoot, John Lightfoot. Begin there. That's quite a range in itself.
That is a lot of reading. When The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was written by C.S. Lewis, was he already a Christian or not? There are some Christian themes, but also some pagan themes as well.
When you deal with comparative literature as he did, he was doing something that was actually done in a way and to a degree by New Testament authors. For instance, the concept of Apollyon, the concept of Hades. These were things that were found in the Greek pagan world that the New Testament authors adopted and included in the New Testament, and they did so under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Much like Paul quoted a pagan poet in Corinthians. Now, we need to be very careful in doing this. It must be something done not with a doctrinal authority, but with a literary technique for communicating doctrinal authority. I have not objected to those things that C.S. Lewis included in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia, if they are read with those caveats. Draw a distinction between what he is doing in terms of a literary technique as a writer and professor of comparative literature with his doctrinal theology. Okay? I don't have a problem. I don't see a problem with it if you consider it as literature, not as doctrinal theology.
Good answer. Where do Christians draw the line with tech? Should we be rejecting the digital ID and currency?
Look, at this point, I simply echo what I've always been saying. The evolution of these technologies will ultimately pave the way for Revelation 13. I have no doubt. If we get into quantum computing, we're already going into ternary software programs as opposed to binary. And of course, if we see, and we probably will, the advent of super AI. The problem is never with science or technology itself. The problem is with fallen man. The world is in the power of the wicked one. Anything fallen man can use for evil will be used for evil. Right now, we are having a Christian webcast. We have Christian Bible studies, expositions of God's word. Much evangelism and apologetics are now done online. The internet is being used for good. Simultaneously, it is being used for tremendous evil. It is never an issue of the technology itself, but the way it's used. However, we live in a fallen world. Anything that can be used for good will ultimately be used for evil. And I have no doubt that the advent of these technologies, including digital ID and electronic fiat currencies, I have no doubt that these things are stepping stones towards Revelation 13.
Thank you, Jacob. Jacob, your opinion on Warren Wiersbe's the Bible.
Wiersbe.
Thank you. Wiersbe, the Bible's exposition commentary. What is your opinion?
I consider Warren Wiersbe as a brother in Christ, and I consider him to be a credible expositor of God's word. Will I agree with him on every point? Not necessarily, but he's one of the good guys.
Thank you, Jacob. The West has been invaded by Islamists, whereas
Yes.
nations are now fighting against nation. A precursor for more of what's to come, Jacob?
I'm not sure I understand the question as phrased. There will be a conflict between the Islamic world and the Judeo-Christian world, yes. And this almost certainly relates to what the book of Daniel tells us about the kings of the north and the kings of the south that will in some way recapitulate the fight that Mark Antony had with Octavius, with Caesar Augustus, in the days of Cleopatra. It'll replay or recapitulate that in some way. But it is of significance prophetically. The conflict between the Muslim world and the Judeo-Christian world, as I've said multiple times, does not have its origins with the rebirth of Israel or Zionism. It has its origins in the womb of Rebecca, of Rivka. two sons, two twins, the battle between the twins. And it even has an earlier harbinger, precursor in the conflict between Ishmael and Isaac.
Thank you, Jacob. Your view on CERN
By the
being
way, it'll culminate, such conflicts will culminate in Isaiah 19, among other passages. Sorry.
no problem. Thank you. Your view on CERN being a possible continuation of the Tower of Babel, acting as a conductor to reach spiritual worlds.
CERN is a fast accelerator reactor on Lac Léman, Lake Geneva, near Montreux, only it's on the French side. I've known people who've seen it. I've been close to it, but I've never seen it myself, but I am familiar with it. It is simply a particle accelerator. It's not about CERN per se. It is about the following. As we have pointed out innumerable times, with the Enlightenment particularly, there was a dichotomy, a separation between science and the occult. In the Greek world and into the Middle Ages, that separation was not there. Astronomy and astrology were the same. But then there was the schism. Astronomy, astrophysics went one way, the zodiac went another. Folk medicine, the superstition went one way. Medical science and pharmacology went the other. The science separated from the superstition. There was alchemy. With alchemy, magic and chemistry were the same. With the Enlightenment, chemistry and physics went one way, magic went the other way. For the last 30 years or so, I've been saying there is a rapprochement happening between science and the occult. It is happening in holistic medicine. It is happening in computer video graphics and holography. It is happening in certain aspects of particle physics. And it is happening in biogenetic engineering. How long will it be before Hindus want to clone the DNA of their dead grandmother to bring her back to life and facilitate reincarnation and karma with technological means? There will be a rapprochement between science and the occult that is already underway. It's already beginning to take place. One of the areas that's taking place is people researching things like singularity, the Bose particle, things of this nature, where the spherical rotation of the accelerator in CERN is where a lot of this research is being done. It's like anything else. Is the technology a problem? No. But will the technology be used for evil? Yes. Is the technology itself occult? No. Will such technologies be used in that way? Yes.
Thank you, Jacob. I'm assuming this next one is about the nativity. Was there no room in the inn, or was it a room in a house?
There was no room in the inn. From what scholars who know about the Sitzim Leben of the first century and during Second Temple period Judaism, it would not be unusual for people to have other places where they would sleep in or stay in that were not in a structured house. One example would be tombs. Tombs were prepared before death. If a tomb had a corpse or corpses in it, or an ossuary containing bones in it, it would be whitewashed. So pilgrims coming to celebrate things like Passover would not be ritually defiled and unable to celebrate the feast in Jerusalem. They would mark it with whitewash. Hence, Jesus, you whitewash tomb, or Paul and Acts, you whitewash wall. They would sleep in tombs that had not been used yet to inter corpses or to place ossuaries. So too, there would be other things like lean-tos, possibly stables, things of this nature. Not really a barn, but they didn't have the barns. Well, they did, but not in the sense we have. These other structures outside the house would be used for human accommodation, particularly during the pilgrim feasts, because there would not be enough accommodation for everyone traveling to and from Jerusalem. People would try to stay with relatives or friends, as Jesus did with Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. There was obviously no room at the inn. I would just take it at face value. He stayed in some other kind of structure, stable, whatever it was. It was obviously a place where there was a manger, where animals were feeding. That's what we know. I would just take it as that. Now, we do have other teachings. We have a recorded teaching called the strength of the ox. The strength of the ox. And Jesus was laid in the manger where the ox would eat. You shall not muzzle the ox when he's threshing and things like this. We go into this symbolism in a bit of depth on the recorded teaching on the strength of the ox. But the nativity narratives do state that there was no room in the inn. The fact that the Messiah, who could have been born in a palace, was born in a stable. The only person who could have ever chosen the circumstances of his birth chose to be born in a stable in an occupied country, a member of a despised race, and born into a lower middle class, maybe upper working class family. That's what Jesus did. He identified with the poor. He identified with what at that time would have been called the Am Ha'aretz. And that happened right from the time of his birth. There is again a symbolic meaning that he was found in swaddling clothes. Swaddling was also used as bandaging or for embalming. So he was born to die. They wrapped him up like you'd wrap up an embalmed corpse. The Magi would later bring myrrh, which was used in the embalming process. In any event, whether it was a per se stable or some kind of a lean-to or dugout, that doesn't really matter. We do know it was a place where animals sought shelter and animals were fed. But it was not all that uncommon at that time for people to sleep in such places. That's the answer.
All right. How is Eastern Orthodox false? What are the heretical doctrines?
Like Roman Catholicism, it is sacramentalist. Like Roman Catholicism, it is saturated with necromancy and mysticism. Here is the main difference. Roman Catholicism calls the graven images to which they pray sacramentals. Sacramentals. They would just say, when they kneel down before a graven image, oh, it reminds us of the dead person we're praying to. St. Anthony, St. Francis, whatever. Okay. In the Greek Orthodox tradition, or the Russian Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox, the Byzantine churches, it is different. They believe that the icon, like a stained glass window, has a metaphysical property or power, that you actually pray through the icon to enter the spiritual realm. You enter the spiritual realm where you can communicate with God through the graven image. This is really weird stuff. It's like a looking glass. It's something weird. Okay. You enter. Can you imagine a computer screen where somebody thinks they can enter the netherworld or the afterlife through a computer screen? And that may well be coming. Well, that's what the Greek Orthodox Church believes. This relates to their doctrine, a false doctrine, called theosis. It's a distortion of a truth. They believe the center of the gospel is that God became one with man, so man could be one with God in the person of Christ. Now, that is a truth in itself, but they don't place the emphasis on regeneration. They place the emphasis on this oneness. And this oneness is achieved by us through communication with the supernatural, through a graven image, through a window, stained glass, whatever. They believe that it actually has a power that is supernatural in itself. It takes the idolatry of Roman Catholicism one step higher and one step further, if that helps.
Thank you, Jacob. Are the Nephilim giants, could they be redeemed, or do they suffer the fate of fallen angels?
They suffer the fate of fallen angels. The Geborim, or the Anakim, or the giants. The Nephilim comes from the Hebrew lipol, to fall. They're the fallen ones. They came down according to the book of Jadish onto Mount Hermon, and then procreated with human women. These were they became demonoids. The Nephilim themselves were angelic beings, fallen angelic beings who came in a human form. Their offspring, what they produced, were giants. Goliath being an example.
Thank you, Jacob. December 21st is the 7th day of Hanukkah, and exactly 77 years, 7 months, and 7 days from May 15th, 1948. Your thoughts? Could it be significant?
I think that when events of a prophetic significance happen at any Hebrew holy day, they are of significance. For instance, Haman was determined to destroy the Jews. He was defeated in the book of Esther in a situation where you had this viciously anti-Semitic tyrant determined to wipe out the Jews on the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates River. And he was defeated on the feast of Esther, we call Purim, on the 14th of Adar. The year was 1991. The Haman was Saddam Hussein. After his promise to liberate Palestine and wipe out the Jews and shooting the Scud missiles at Tel Aviv and Haifa, what day did he surrender to the Americans and British? The 14th of Adar, the Feast of Purim. That is no coincidence. When you see events that are of a prophetic importance taking place on a Hebrew holy day, it is not a mere coincidence that it happened then. It happened for a reason. At that time, God is looking over his word to perform it. Okay.
Thank you, Jacob. Two last questions before we go to Christmas. What does it mean in Genesis 3:14 when the Lord God said to the serpent, "You shall eat the dust all the days of your life"?
Obviously, it had a biological reference to vipers and serpents, snakes. Okay? They've got this long tongue that tries to lick up insects out of the dust. And when they bring it into their mouth, their saliva obviously turns the dust to a soft muck. It is something that literally happened to that species as a result. Okay. However, the serpent is a picture of Satan the deceiver. Okay. Man was made from dust. Thou art dust, and to dust thou shalt return, which is reversed by the resurrection. Okay. The death of unsaved people is the food of Satan. The death of all the days until the Lord returns, all the days of his life. The food of Satan, of the serpent, of the deceiver, is the death of the unsaved. Okay. For us, there's the power of the resurrection. We are anatomically reconstituted and raised from the dead. This does not happen to the unsaved, according to Revelation chapter 20, until after the millennial reign of Christ. Satan, that's his food.
Yep.
That's what he lives for. That's what he thrives on. That is his delight. To take as many people with him where he's going, even though he imagines somehow he might win. I hope that answers the question.
Excellent answer, Jacob. Excellent answer. Last question. Do any of the panel still find fresh understanding in the scriptures as we see the day approaching? If so, what kind of things have you noticed?
Well, that's quite a question. I think we've all noticed things. Just the fulfillment of prophetic events in itself. But I'll leave the rest of the answer to others.
Oh, Elon, there you go.
Mhm.
He just punted it to you.
All right. Okay. Well, there's quite. I mean, I find I drew more because of over the last few years, I've also been responding to critiques of the pre-Roth position. I did find that I got a deeper understanding of things like the Book of Revelation and the Olivet Discourse, for example. And that became, I think, one of the things that I really began to appreciate more and more as I dug into the Book of Revelation, for example, is how much, well, the kind of, a lot of the mysteriousness about it really kind of falls away. I'm not saying that there are things I don't know or anything, or that I understand everything but certainly in terms of the way the book is structured and the way it works and what it's intended to do, I think has become a lot clearer. As I've studied it more, I found that, you know, I mean, let me just wind backwards a little bit. You know, when I first came to know the Lord, the Book of Revelation was something like, it felt almost like something mystical and strange and very
Yeah.
obtuse.
Yes.
But it's actually an immensely practical book, and as there's most of the symbolism within the book is explained within the book, with a few exceptions. There are some things that we're less clear about, but
Yes.
it is, you know, as I've grown in my understanding of it, I realize it's not some. It is basically it's a survival manual, in a sense, for how to approach the 70th week of Daniel. It tells you what kind of things to expect and what our
Yes.
responses as believers. I mean, the
Yes.
letters, for example, to the seven churches. I mean, there's a lot of themes within those seven letters that also plug into the middle of the book. You know, he that overcomes, you know, shall be seated with me in my throne as I was in my Father's throne. The Lord says to the overcomers, and also these warnings about tolerating false doctrine, and you know, and speaking to the church in I think Thyatira and everything. You know, about the Jezebel, you know, that all and the woman called Jezebel who's bringing false teaching in and teaching that you know, the Lord's servants to commit fornication. That's all connected. You see, you know, straight away it's connected with the ideas in the middle of the book of fault the worship of the Antichrist and being involved with the mystery Babylon. You know, and it's really when you understand that book it's designed to speak to believers. It's not and you know, from beginning to end. That's one of the things that really struck me so much. And it's not many people approach that book like it's oh yeah, I only need to look at the first 7 chapters, and after that it doesn't apply to me anymore till we get to chapter 20, 21 or whatever. People, you know, over the last, since about the 1830s, people have approached that book as if it was just describing all the things you're not going to experience, you know, because you get taken away before all that happens. But no, no, no. That book is God's standing orders for what to do in the 70th week of Daniel. And most of that book, somewhere apart from when the day of the Lord begins, I mean, all the rest of that book really is survival instructions for how to get through that week. You know, how to stay faithful, what to do, how to avoid being deceived. Those things that will happen in the 70th week that bring deception, how to stay away from them. It's all immensely practical stuff. That's just one of the things that has become more clear to me, and there's more as well. But it's one of my favourite books now. It's not because it's obtuse or weird. It's just very practical, and it's so full of God's grace and love to His people as well. And that's one of the books that gives me great hope. because we've read the end of the book. But you know that as you fix your mind on certain things within Scripture, they become more precious. And that hope, you know, at the end of that book, the hope that the Lord presents us with there has become more real. I think that's just a few insights that I had from it. Anyway, this was more, but we have time limits. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's all right.
Go ahead, Davey.
Yeah, I'll quickly share just something that spoke to me recently, but I also want to share something too. Keep your eyes open for a short devotional video coming out by Marco, hopefully before Christmas. I know a passage spoke to him recently, basically Hannah's prayer, and he does plan on recording a devotional on it. He has it written out, which he sent me to read, and I was really blessed by it. So hopefully keep him in prayer and that we can get it recorded and up before Christmas. But one thing I read, I've been rereading Luke, and one of the things that just blessed me, and it's funny, you read things and you don't always pick up on them. But Luke chapter 7, verses 1 to 10, just this Roman centurion, usually we hear a lot about his faith and all the rest of it. The focus was his faith, but this time his character is really what stood out to me. Not just his care and his love, for his slave, but also his love and relationship with the Jewish people. That kind of really blessed me. Here he is, he's a Roman centurion, yet he sends Jewish people to implore Jesus to come to heal his slave. And the Jewish people say, he is worthy for you to grant this to him, for he loves our nation. And it was he who built us our synagogue. And I was just sort of blown away by his character. So that was something that just blessed me this year, especially, with the rise of anti-Semitism and the rise of replacement theology and, all this horrible anti-Semitism in the church. That just blessed me.
Yeah.
All right, with that, we conclude another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. I'm going to give the final word to you, Jacob. Please close us out.
Well, first of all, we certainly wish every one of you all of God's best nativity blessings and blessings into the civil new year for you and your family. If you or all of us who have unsaved loved ones or backslidden loved ones, that they will come to faith in Jesus in this new year. There's no better prayer than that. The salvation of our loved ones in the forthcoming year. I would like to ask prayer for three things, though, very quickly. One, my sister Terry, who is a believer, one of the few believers in my family, was rushed into emergency surgery yesterday in New York. We were very concerned. Thank God she seems to be stable and she's doing well. But please pray for my sister Terry, who is a saved believer in Jesus. Secondly, please pray for the film. Why this time is different. It is important. And thirdly, please pray, don't laugh at me, for Harvey Weinstein. A elder in a Moriel church is a prison guard, and he has regular contact with Harvey Weinstein. I know he's one of the most hated men in Hollywood. He's originally from New York, from Queens. And I know he was ultra liberal and all this. But I sent him a gospel tract for Jewish people. He's Jewish. I sent him a gospel tract, and he read it with some enthusiasm. I don't know what's going to become of it, but I was able to get the gospel to him through a believer who's an elder in a Moriel church who works in the prison system. Please pray that the Lord will open his heart. God is wanting none to perish. What a wonderful testimony and witness it would be if somebody in his position, who's done what he's done, became a believer in Jesus. I saw this happen with David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, dear friend and brother in the Lord. And I'd love to see it happen again with Harvey Weinstein. Concerning Rob Reiner, he said he believed in the teachings of Jesus. I would hope against hope he did, but I see no indication he did. But with his life, there's hope. Please pray for the salvation of Harvey Weinstein. I did manage, by God's hand, I believe the Lord opened the door for me to get him the gospel. We'll see what happens next. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless.
God bless you, everyone, and we will see you next week on Boxing Day. Yay. Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan, to India to Africa, and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.